Welcome once again, and it's getting interesting as we continue on these sessions. Wow, we are using the book of Acts, chapter number 16, and we are on verse number 3, which says, "And Paul wanted to have him to go on with him, and he took him and circumcised him because of the Jews who were in that region. For his father was a Greek, or they knew that his father was Greek." So I want to focus on the aspect that says because of the Jews who were in that region. So Paul is circumcising Timothy because of the Jews who were in that region. So it's quite interesting that what we see here is circumcision that is being done by the man of God, Paul, and he's doing it because of the Jews that are in the region. And it's not just something that he's doing, but he's doing it intentionally because there is a group of people that are in the area, and the scripture says that he did it because of them, because they were in that region. So it's quite interesting that there is something that somebody does on the calendar of God, because there are people who were observing him. So this was not a salvation or a salvic process. It was a strategy for succession, and it was not because Timothy was not saved. It was not Timothy was not discipled. It was not Timothy that he was not approved, because the scripture says in verse number 1, Paul noticed, or there was a disciple named Timothy, whose mother was a Jewish believer and his father a Greek. So Timothy was already a believer, and when he met with Paul, he is being introduced to circumcision. Paul had to circumcise him. So his salvation qualified him for heaven, but circumcision was going to qualify him for representing the kingdom and representing Paul and the mandate. So sons are cut where servants are excused. So circumcision is done on the sons, is not done on the servants. One of the things that will become a spiritual landmark over your life is circumcision, because it is done on those that are qualified to be sons, not servants, because servants, they may not be need for them to be circumcised. And what Paul introduced there is called contextual wisdom, because he was applying and changing truth in those different environments without compromise. He could have compromised on Timothy and not circumcise him, but he knew that it would have an impact on his credibility, and he would have avoided something that was very important for him. So I want you to know that spiritual circumcision is surrendering our cultural privileges. It is abandoning our personal preferences. When one is going through circumcision, they are saying that I've abandoned my personal preferences, and they are submitting opinions to doctrine, because that was supposed to be done, and they are yielding to God's processes. So many people want to be taken, but they want to avoid circumcision. They want to avoid circumcision. And Paul took him and circumcised him because of the Jews. All right. So this, if one is not circumcised, they would have a covering without correction. it is dangerous to have covering that is not giving you correction. This is not correction because somebody has seen you doing something wrong. Paul didn't see Timothy doing something wrong, but Paul knew that Timothy was going to be wrongly understood if he functions without proper formation, because that journey was going to be a journey without pruning. And I pray that we may not have access without cost. So Paul is introducing the wisdom that would also be able to build that spiritual climate. Wisdom requires reading the spiritual climate. So the contextual wisdom there is that he was reading the spiritual climate in that region. And because the Jews of that region would know that Timothy was going to be considered an uncircumcised Jew, for they knew that his father was Greek. So he needed to go through that, and it was an issue of strategic compliance. And many people who refuse circumcision will disqualify themselves for deeper journeys, because there are times that you are circumcised because of, for the reason of the people that you minister to. And God may love you, or God loved him, but he would not advance uncut flesh. So Jews in those regions would have stumbled over his uncircumcision. So Paul, for his strategic mission purposes, he had to circumcise the young men. So this is for the reason of those we are to minister to. So our influence sometimes has to go with acceptance, with our level of acceptance, and circumcision would have been unnecessary and offensive. But Paul refused, and he wanted to accommodate him with circumcision. So this is something that I felt like we needed to maybe just provide an understanding for as we talk about the circumcision that took place over Timothy because of the Jews. Thank you, and let's see you in the next session as we conclude our week.